Could you spare some change? Chances are, if you're like most people, the thought of change can be a very scary ordeal. Typically, the older we get, change becomes harder and harder for us. But has anyone ever told you the reason why? Well, there are a few reasons. First, when it comes to the rewiring of the brain, or neuroplasticity, neurons that fire together stay together. What that means is that, like the expression goes, if you don't use it, you lose it, and if you use it a lot, well, guess what? You just simply can't get rid of it. One of the many reasons why people fall into repetitive, destructive patterns. Another reason why people fail to change is because there are just too many people telling them to do so. The whole premise of being frozen and remaining stagnant is largely due to feelings of fear of the unknown. So imagine this. A person that is already afraid to quit smoking symptoms, due to fearing what the withdrawal symptoms are going to be like, is now being told by his mother, you know, those cigarettes are really going to kill you. You should really quit smoking. The thing is, people need to feel safe and relatively happy inside their environment for change to take place. When people don't have this feeling, and when people try to push them further into that corner, the behaviors of family members, for instance, despite coming from a loving place, tend to make matters worse through what is called psychological reaction. All psychological reaction means is that people typically are autonomous, independent beings and will reassert their own autonomy if challenged. Even if that means making a foolish choice just because someone told them to do something opposite. I'm sure you know people in your life that are extreme examples of this principle. Also, if people need safety and being in a good place to change their behaviors, what happens when you're late paying for your rent, can't feed yourself, are in chronic pain, and the list goes on and on. Think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs and how important physiological needs are, such as food, clothing, transportation, and shelter, and how these variables can not only interfere with change, but arriving to treatment sessions as well. In addition, something called cognitive dissonance plays a role in our bad decision making, when people decide to continue maladaptive or destructive patterns due to their own false or distorted rationalizations of doing so. An example would be, for instance, this superstore that has billions of dollars, and I shop here all the time, so they typically won't miss this pack of batteries that I'm stealing right now. Another example could be the reasons such as, I treat my wife so poorly because the only way she listens to me is when I say nasty things to her. Lastly, when it comes to achieving anything on your change list, keep in mind that the more you put on your change plate, the less likely anything is going to change. They call this initiation potential, and when you overload yourself with stuff that you want to accomplish all at once, the challenge seems almost impossible to overcome. You become discouraged, and the rest is a tragic story, like my many New Year's resolutions. So the question remains, so how do people change? Well, I hate to break it to you guys. Some people just don't want to change, or they feel as though they don't have a problem. This same group could also say that they have a problem, but they concede that they are powerless to change anything. We call these types of people visitors in treatment, and are known by the trans-theoretical model as the pre-contemplation stage. People in this stage are perhaps the hardest clients to have. Why? Because typically these people are in the therapy office because of someone else. This could be a family member, teacher, probation officer, lawyer, or spouse. Typically, the most any therapist can do in these instances is simply listen for change talk. Yes, change talk. And issue observational tasks to the client, such as, I know you don't think you have a problem, but somebody wants you here. What do you think they think is going on? The next stage is what most people find themselves for at least one area of their life in: contemplation. Think of contemplation as to having immobilizing ambivalence towards any matter in their lives. I bet you know a person that can think of 1,001 reasons not to take action in their lives, but at the same time concede that eventuality of change. Take weight loss, for instance. Most American society has at least once in their lives contemplated going to the gym or starting a diet. There are always pros and cons for pretty much everything in life. And people have the natural propensity towards kicking the can down the proverbial road through talking themselves out of that very action they seek. Examples would be, I simply don't have enough time for the gym, or diets can be very expensive. While at the same time realizing, I need to get my blood pressure and cholesterol under control, and I wish I was a size 6 again. There are a lot of interventions for people on the contemplation stage of change. And the only thing you should try to remember, if you have a loved one in this stage, is that they have to convince themselves of change. A therapist exclusively trained in motivational interviewing would be very handy in this situation. And the acronym DARN CATS is an intervention typically used. Go ahead, do an online search for it. DARN CATS. DARNCATS. People in the contemplation stage are also known as being a complainant, since typically all these clients want to do is talk about the problem. We've all been there, being engulfed in our problems and the strong desire to ruminate or perseverate over them until we are blue in the face. We have also seen our share of buttheads, or people that acknowledge that they have a problem and then use the word but. I know I need to stop drinking, but I really don't have that bad of a problem. Or, I know I need to get out of this relationship, but where do I have to go? Typically, even therapists get discouraged when they hear this, since the word but generally negates everything that was said before it. I know I have to make a change in my life, but right now it's just too much going on. See again the client acknowledging the necessity for change, and then, just as quickly as that desire came, but came along and swept it away. However, people in the planning and action stages of change are considered consumers of treatment. Sometimes, clients can already be in this stage when they meet their therapist for the first time. And that very behavior of picking up the phone and calling a professional has already initiated the change momentum, so to speak. In other words, the hardest part of their ordeal is generally over, which is the first step. Typically, observational tasks are issued to these populations. Encouragement, reflection of what they're already doing right, and allowing the client to get to know themselves better. Some interventions that are typically used on the stage is narrative therapy's externalizing the problem, which highlights the fact that the problem is the problem and that you are not the problem itself. One way of doing this is by calling the problem a name that distinguishes it from yourself, such as death sticks for smoking and hanging out with the fishes when you choose to drown your sorrows at the local watering hole with alcohol. Another intervention that is just as powerful as it is risky is similar to being back in high school, which is embracing peer pressure. Take quitting smoking, for instance. You bought the patches, have a plan in place, and have been listening to what your therapist has been saying intensely. Now it's time to take your first step. What's the only other thing to do now? Let everybody know what is happening. Not only will this give you the peer support that you need to accomplish your goal, but this intervention raises the stakes and utilizes potential embarrassment as added fuel against failure. Again, only use the strategy if you are prepared for the possible consequence of having to tell your friends and family members that you have relapsed. Typically, people attempting to quit smoking relapse between 4 and 5 times before quitting for good. Now, although the original model created by James O. Prochaska of the University of Rhode Island, along with Carlo Di Clemente, beginning in 1977, had a termination stage of change, meaning that the problem no longer exists. This model was quickly removed, since due to the fact that most addictions maladaptive behaviors, or negative emotions almost always have a propensity for returning. Your brain is wired to work autonomously sometimes, and although things such as resisting the urge to drink typically get easier the longer it's been, that desire and psychological components of that addiction will always be a substantial risk to that individual. Consequently, we end at the maintenance stage of change. Maintenance, again, is a lifetime achievement. And typically, when people start doing better for themselves, guess what happens? They drastically begin losing most of the support and services that was continuing that great momentum. Well, there you have it. Perhaps one of the most important videos you can watch when it comes to your own mental health. The process for and against changing one's life, and where Change Talk LLC gets its name. Stay tuned next time for a discussion about pathology, diagnosis, and what we call prognosis, or also known as how people get better. Thank you for watching and supporting a veteran-owned small business. Please spread the word that change is coming. I hope to see you soon. Take care. One of the things we'd like to start doing in Change Talk is to start discussing various psychotherapeutic tools that people can use at home that will help increase their sense of mental health. Now, these damage dolls, they can be found pretty much almost anywhere online. They pretty much range from about $12 to $20, and they stem from what's called primal therapy. Now, although primal therapy typically doesn't work when it comes to long-term benefit, they're great for alleviating stress and releasing what's called catharsis, or an emotional release, right? So when it comes to, let's say, having a bad day at work, or let's say you have some sort of depression when it comes to something that transpired earlier today, again, you can take it out on something versus someone. Now again, the relief or the benefit for a device such as a damage doll is short term. But again, if you're up against a wall and you have nothing else, right? You can use one of these, punch a pillow, scream at the top of your lungs if it's in a socially acceptable place. But at the same time, please remember, it's a short-term solution for a much long-term problem.